She didn't hear him arrive. Not at first. Caius Navarro stood in the shadowed archway, a man made of calculated stillness. He hadn't planned on returning from San Francisco that afternoon, but a storm had grounded his jet early, and now he found himself paused at the edge of the hallway, drawn toward a sound he didn't expect in his sterile home. Effort. Care. A woman humming to herself under her breath. Welcome to CedarLight Love Stories, a place where romance, emotions, and heartfelt journeys come alive. Love has many sides, tender, challenging, and unforgettable. Which part of love speaks to you most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your story matters here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a moment of inspiration and connection. Together, let's keep love glowing. His eyes followed the lines of her posture, perfectly aligned hips, the gentle slope of her neck, the way her fingers fought to push jagged shards of glass into a dustpan without slicing skin. The scent of wine hung between them like history repeating itself. You're wasting time with that. His voice didn't startle her at first. It pierced. Isolde's hand flinched, and the sponge slipped from her fingers, soaking the hem of her uniform. She turned quickly, kneeling upright. Mr. Navarro, I didn't hear you return. Clearly. She reached for the largest fragment, her fingers trembling, not from fear, but from tension. Born of long weeks in the same house with a man who spoke rarely but looked too closely. I'll be done shortly. He stepped forward, the soles of his dress shoes silent against the imported marble. You'll cut yourself. I'll be careful. He crouched beside her. The air between them shifted. You say that like you're used to bleeding. She hesitated. Then his hand closed around hers, firm, warm, expensive, and something in her chest clenched. Not because she was touched often, but because she wasn't. And not by him. Not like this. Their eyes met. There were no flinches, no gasps. Just a prolonged pause, charged, intimate, unscripted. Let me, he murmured, fingers brushing hers to take the glass away. She didn't let go at first. When she finally did, it felt like surrendering something far heavier than crystal. Isolde stood too quickly. Apologies, sir. He rose with her, his height a wall, his presence unmistakably closer than professionalism allowed. Why didn't you call for help? Because I broke it. It's mine to clean. His gaze searched hers, unreadable. That's a brutal way to live. She swallowed. I grew up with less delicate things. Caius tilted his head. Where are you from? Sevilleta. Malta. And you came to America to scrub wine from marble floors? She steadied herself. To pay for licensing exams. I was a nurse back home. I clean here to save enough. And because pride doesn't pay rent. A twitch in his jaw, disapproval or admiration she couldn't tell. You should have stayed in medicine, he said. I planned to. Just not on someone else's dime. He didn't smile. Caius Navarro didn't smile. But his silence felt different now, softer, less judgmental. You don't say much, do you? She asked before she could stop herself. He blinked, slowly. Only when it matters. A distant rumble of thunder rolled through the estate. The storm, she realized, was arriving early. I should get back to work, she said. I'm not stopping you. But neither did he move. The two of them remained there, in a space that had stopped resembling employer and employee, and had begun to hum with something else entirely. He finally stepped back, let the house staff replace the wine, and take the night off. I don't. Consider it a gesture, not a favor. She nodded, brushing her palms over her thighs. Understood. He lingered another moment, then turned, and walked away. The rest of the evening unfolded with mechanical quiet. Isolde returned to her quarters tucked behind the east wing. She didn't eat, couldn't read. Her fingers still felt the outline of his hand on hers, as if it had left a heat deeper than the surface. Outside, the rain began to fall. Power flickered once, then failed. Isolde lit a match in the hallway, one by one bringing candles to life. The estate had dozens of them stored for blackouts. She worked barefoot, the cold tile beneath her toes, the faint scent of wine still clinging to her wrists. Her blouse was damp from the sudden change in weather. She didn't expect to see him again that night, but as she turned into the library with the last candle, there he was. Standing by the fireplace, barely visible in the dark, Caius Navarro looked like a thought she hadn't dared finish. You should sleep, she murmured, more to fill the space than to command. "I don't sleep." She reached around him to light the final candle on the mantel. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear. He didn't step away. "Isolde," he said, like tasting something forbidden. Her breath caught. She turned toward him too fast, bumping into his chest. He didn't move. His hand lifted, not aggressively, not gently either, and curled around the nape of her neck. "This is a mistake," she whispered. "Yes," he agreed. And then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't cruel. It was the kind of kiss that comes from two people who've lied to themselves for too long. His mouth found the line of her jaw, her lips, the space below her ear. She moaned, quiet and instinctual, as he lifted her without asking and lowered her onto the velvet chaise in the corner. Clothes were discarded in silence, not rushed but unspoken. His jacket, her blouse, her skirt, his belt. Their skin met in warm collision, candlelight flickering over bodies that hadn't been touched in months, years perhaps. He didn't say her name again, but she said his, just once, into his throat as he moved inside her. It was not rushed. It was not delicate. It was inevitable. When it ended, neither of them reached for words. She rose, eventually, dressed in pieces, combed fingers through her hair, avoided his eyes. He watched her from the shadows of his own mind. When the power returned, the candles flickered out one by one. She was already gone. The estate was quiet. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy sort that sinks into the floorboards after something unsaid takes place. Caius sat alone in the library long after she had gone. The flickering candle flames softened the sharp lines of the room, but they couldn't warm him. Not truly. He still felt her in the space, the imprint of her breath on his chest, the damp silk of her hair across his shoulder, the tremor in her fingers when she had buttoned up in silence and slipped away without a glance back. He hadn't stopped her, but he hadn't asked her to stay either. Somewhere deep down he regretted that more than he wanted to admit. Isolde didn't sleep that night, not deeply. She curled on the narrow bed in her room, knees drawn to her chest, his scent still clinging to her skin. She didn't know what the morning would bring, only that she couldn't remain in limbo between a life she had carefully planned and a night that had shattered every boundary she'd drawn. When dawn broke, it came gray and unspectacular. The rain had passed, but clouds hung stubborn over Beverly Hills. The usual sound of house staff preparing breakfast echoed through the mansion. Isolde avoided the main hallway. She dressed quickly, packing the small carryall she kept beneath the bed. Toothbrush, nurse certification documents, her sister's letter from Malta. She folded her uniform last and zipped the bag slowly, like dragging the edge of goodbye across her skin. She didn't tell anyone. She slipped out the service door while the kitchen staff bickered over eggs. And just like that, she was gone. Caius stood in the dining room 2 hours later, watching a fresh cup of black coffee steam across a white tablecloth. Something felt off. He didn't see her, didn't hear her voice humming in the distance. No faint echo of movement from the hallway. No scent of lemon from the cleaning spray she always used. Subtle, persistent. "Where's Marin?" he asked without looking up. The head housekeeper blinked, startled. "She didn't report for morning rotation, sir. Would you like me to call her in?" He stared ahead, unreadable. No, she was gone. Not fired, not dismissed. She had removed herself, on her own terms. He respected it, hated it, needed it explained. 3 weeks passed. 3 measured, efficient, soulless weeks. Caius buried himself in back-to-back strategy meetings, late-night code reviews, and clinical board sessions for his AI emotional mapping division. He approved 2 major mergers and declined 3 venture deals without blinking. But each night he returned to the same room, where the candle had burned. Low, where the chaise still bore a memory he refused to name. Her name he hadn't said aloud since she left. Isolde. And every time he tried to forget her, tried to let logic erase feeling, he'd remember the way she had whispered his name like a secret. Across town, Isolde rented a 1-bedroom apartment behind a small community clinic on the edge of East LA. It wasn't luxury, but it had a working radiator and a tiny balcony that caught the morning sun. She worked evenings at a home care agency, sometimes as a nurse, sometimes assisting the elderly with errands. The money wasn't enough, but it paid rent and bought prenatal vitamins. She hadn't told anyone yet, not even the clinic doctor who noticed her looking pale and sent her for a scan. It was at that appointment, staring at the black and white screen, that she realized the scope of her new reality. 2 heartbeats. Not 1, 2. Twins. Her hands shook as she pressed them to her belly, still flat beneath the cotton dress, but already beginning to feel like something more than her own. 2 more months passed. She moved through the city like a shadow. Careful, independent, silent. She had no plans to reach out to him. What could she even say? That she had broken every rule? Crossed a line that could never be undone? Worse, that her body now carried not just the memory of him, but the continuation of it. Caius tried to resume normalcy. He tried to forget her by replacing the wine gallery's lighting system, by firing 2 members of his executive staff, by upgrading the biometric facial analysis in their AI prototype. But he couldn't forget what her absence felt like. He returned home early one night in late March. A breeze swept through the estate, rustling the half-open windows. The power flickered again, just once, and for a moment he swore he saw her in the corner, barefoot, candle in hand. Then the lights returned, and she was gone again. His assistant approached him the following morning during a board strategy session. "There's a delivery for you. Confidential medical file. It's flagged urgent." Caius raised a brow. "From?" The assistant hesitated. "It's about someone named Isolde Marin." The air changed. His fingers closed over the tablet like it was a weapon. He tapped it open. "Patient, Isolde Marin status, pregnant, 8 weeks confirmed fetal count, 2 viable heartbeats." He blinked. Once, then again. The words didn't change. He didn't ask questions, didn't make excuses. He rose from the table, pushing his chair back without a word, and walked straight out of his own boardroom. He didn't call ahead, didn't bring flowers, didn't rehearse what he'd say. He found her at the same community clinic listed in the medical file. Isolde was sitting in the corner, waiting for her follow-up check, a paperback. In her hand, her hair pulled back into a low, practical twist. She looked up. Their eyes locked. She didn't run, but her spine straightened like she'd been struck. He approached her without fanfare, his presence like gravity. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," she whispered. "You weren't supposed to disappear." She opened her mouth, closed it. Then finally, quietly, "I didn't know what you'd do. Why didn't you tell me?" Her fingers knotted in her lap. "Because I didn't know if you'd want them, or me." His voice softened. "You never gave me the chance. I thought it would make it easier," she said. "For who?" She didn't answer. He knelt beside her chair, eyes level with her belly. It was just beginning to show, subtle, barely there, but he saw it. He placed a hand over hers. "Isolde, I want everything that comes with you." Her throat tightened. "Even if it ruins your image? Even if I don't fit into your world? I'll build a new one." The morning after their clinic encounter was the first day Caius Navarro felt time differently. He woke without the alarm. No vibrating phone. No automated blinds. No voice assistant reciting the day's schedule. Just light, bleeding gently through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and a hollow silence pressing against his chest. He didn't move at first. He lay there, sheets untouched beside him, staring at the ceiling like it might offer answers. It didn't. At the clinic the day before, she had let him touch her belly, let him whisper promises she hadn't yet accepted. And then, just when he was beginning to believe she might actually let him in again, she'd stood, gently placed a boundary between them, and said, "You need to think this through." And she was right. Caius had spent his life mastering data, logic, investment timing. He didn't rush. He didn't act on impulse. Yet here he was, out of the boardroom, out of sync, out of excuses. He hadn't told anyone where he went, not even his assistant, and he hadn't answered the 36 follow-up messages since walking out. He didn't care. Isolde, meanwhile, stood in the aisle of a pharmacy, holding a receipt and a fresh bottle of folic acid. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him kneeling beside her, not like a man asserting dominance, but like a man surrendering pride, asking, not demanding, for a place in something he didn't fully understand. She wasn't ready to say yes, but she couldn't say no either, because somewhere buried beneath her fears, her logic, and her need for independence, was the ache of remembering how he had touched her the first time, and how her body had memorized him far faster than her mind could justify. By mid-afternoon, Caius stood at the edge of the Navarro estate's nursery wing. It hadn't been used in years. Not since his brother's children had visited one holiday and trashed the place. But now, he opened the doors and stood still. He saw space. Cribs could go here. A reading nook there. Sunlight streamed in from the eastern window, perfect for morning play. He didn't know what babies needed, not yet. But he knew he wanted them to have light. He pulled out his phone, not to schedule a team, but to text her. He hesitated for longer than usual, then finally typed, "Tell me what you need, not just for them, for you." He sent it. And then, for the first time in years, he waited. Isolde saw the message an hour later while folding laundry at the community center. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, she stood before the mirror in the staff bathroom and looked at her own reflection. She looked tired, but stronger. Her belly, now barely visible under the cotton of her blouse, wasn't just a reminder of what had happened. It was a promise. She placed her hands gently over it. 1 heartbeat. 2. She would do this with or without him. But the truth? She didn't want to do it without him. Caius had expected resistance. But silence. That was worse. He wasn't used to being ignored or having his intentions questioned. He'd offered power, resources, his name, but none of those things mattered to her. Isolde didn't want his empire. She wanted sincerity, constancy. He wasn't sure he knew how to offer that. The next evening, he stood outside her apartment building for 23 minutes without going up. He'd gotten the address from the clinic administrator. No bribes, no threats, just a quiet explanation. "I need to see her." The woman had looked at him hard, then scribbled it on a sticky note. Now, he stood on cracked pavement in East LA, feeling more exposed than he had during any investor pitch or product launch. The building buzzed with noise, children shouting from open windows, a baby crying upstairs, someone cooking with too much garlic. It smelled real. It smelled lived in. He almost turned back. Then the door opened. Isolde stepped out with a bag of trash and nearly collided with him. She froze. He did too. "You found me again," she said softly. "I wasn't trying to disappear this time." She didn't speak. "I came to ask, face to face," he added. "Can I be part of this? With no conditions." Her voice was low. "You can't just insert yourself because you're scared." "I'm not scared." "Yes, you are. But maybe that's the first honest thing you've ever admitted." He nodded. "Probably." They stood in silence for a long time. Finally, she gestured toward the stairwell. "I'm not inviting you up. I know. But you can walk with me." "Where?" She shrugged. "Nowhere in particular." So they walked, past peeling murals, kids playing soccer in the street, a corner vendor selling elode. Caius had never walked without purpose. Until that evening. By the time they circled the block and returned to her stoop, she turned to him. "I'm still scared." "Me too. And I can't promise I know what I want yet." "You don't have to," he said. She exhaled, shoulders softening. "But I think I want to find out." He nodded. It wasn't an agreement. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a beginning. Later that night, she sat at her window, watching the city breathe. The twins inside her stirred, and for the first time she allowed herself to whisper his name into the darkness, not as a mistake, but as the seed of something she might one day call love. The Navarro headquarters towered above Wilshire Boulevard like a declaration, every glass panel gleaming, every corridor precise. Employees moved in synchrony, digital passes flashing, voices low, movements fast. Caius Navarro sat in his private office on the 60th floor, but his mind wasn't there. He'd been staring at the same data report for nearly 20 minutes. It wasn't that he didn't understand it. He had built the architecture of the system himself. The problem was, every time he tried to read the quarterly projections, his eyes blurred into memory. Isolde, in the East Wing, her voice quiet. The weight of her body in his arms when she finally leaned into him, the sound of her breath hitching as he whispered promises he hadn't rehearsed. It all looped like faulty code. He set the tablet down and stood, walking toward the window. The skyline was busy, the city breathing with ambition. But the view didn't soothe him, not like it used to. He had gone days without hearing from her. No reply to his message, no update from the clinic, no response to the card and vitamins he'd had discreetly sent. It was as if she'd folded herself back into the parts of the world he couldn't touch, independent, unreachable, and resolved. And somehow, That made him ache in places he didn't know existed. He poured himself a glass of water and returned to his desk. The AI development team had flagged a bug in the new empathy mapping module. It was failing to detect subtle facial microexpressions when users reported low mood levels. It wasn't a complex problem, but he couldn't solve it today. He flipped the screen off and stared at the ceiling. His assistant buzzed through the intercom. "Sir, your 3 o'clock with the public relations firm is on hold." He pressed the button. "Cancel it." There was a pause. "Yes, sir." Caius closed his eyes. The world outside had never felt more distant. Miles away, Isolde leaned against the doorframe of the community health center, watching a group of mothers line up for free formula. She had been volunteering in the mornings, using her nursing license to assist with intake and wellness assessments. It kept her busy, distracted, grounded, but her body was changing. Her balance, her breathing. The twins were growing fast, and though she wore loose clothes, she knew the curve of her stomach was no longer deniable. She glanced down at her phone. Still nothing. She hadn't messaged Caius back, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know how to say the one thing she feared most. "I want to let you in, but I don't know if I know how." That night she lay on her small couch, a warm compress resting on her lower back. One of the twins gave a sharp kick. Then the other followed. She smiled through the discomfort. All right, she whispered. "You're both impatient like him." The memory of Caius kneeling at the clinic, his hand over hers, flickered again. She hadn't imagined the look in his eyes. It wasn't pity. It wasn't shock. It was something far more dangerous. Sincerity. And she didn't know what to do with that yet. At the estate, Caius sat on the edge of his bed, phone in hand. The screen remained blank, no reply. He wasn't used to waiting. Not for deals. Not for meetings. Certainly not for people. But something about Isolde had forced him to unlearn control. She didn't yield to pressure. Didn't respond to status or strategy. She only responded to truth. And for the first time, he wasn't sure if his truth was enough. The following day, his AI division launched the beta test for their emotion-responsive app. It could read voice tremors, analyze user tone, and suggest empathetic responses in real time. It was elegant, efficient, emotionally intelligent, and utterly useless to him, because no algorithm could tell him how to bridge the gap between her silence and his regret. He returned to the nursery wing that evening. The space was still empty, but now he saw possibilities. He made a list. Crib set 2, changing table, soft light curtains, mobile with ocean sounds, bookshelves, not for show, not for press, but for readiness. Because when she called, if she called, he wanted nothing unprepared. Isolde awoke the next morning to a knock on her apartment door. She checked the peephole. A delivery man stood with a clipboard and a large white box. She cracked the door. "Isolde Marin?" "Yes." "Delivery from Navarro Technologies." Her breath caught. She signed and took the box inside. Inside, she found 2 tiny white onesies, one embroidered with "Hello, I'm new here," and the other with "I come with sibling." Underneath, a simple note. "You don't have to say yes, but I'm already preparing." See. She sat on the couch and stared at the clothes. Then, finally, she picked up her phone and typed, "I don't know how to do this with you, but I want to try." The neighborhood around the East LA clinic wasn't the kind of place where billionaires were expected to stroll unnoticed. The streets were narrow, the buildings older, and the sidewalks lined, with corner vendors, community murals, and secondhand bookstores. But that afternoon, Caius Navarro stepped out of the back seat of his black sedan dressed, not in one of his tailored suits, but in a plain button-up shirt and dark jeans, still polished, still unmistakably him, but not trying to be. He carried a reusable grocery bag over one arm, something his assistant insisted he use to blend in. Inside were prenatal essentials, vitamin packets, a soft pregnancy pillow, 2 packs of herbal tea, and a small worn leather book on fatherhood he hadn't told anyone he purchased. He hadn't called ahead. He didn't want her to feel cornered, just seen. Isolde had come early for her follow-up scan. She sat in the corner of the waiting area, legs crossed at the ankles, one hand resting lightly over the gentle rise of her stomach. A nurse handed her a clipboard, and as she filled in the updated information, she caught herself glancing toward the glass doors. She didn't know why. She wasn't expecting anyone. And yet, A knot had formed in her stomach since she sent the message the night before. Just 6 words, I don't know how to try. He hadn't responded, but the knot hadn't gone away. When the door finally opened and Caius stepped in, the air shifted. He didn't search for her, his eyes found her instantly. She stood slowly, clipboard in hand, unsure if she should move toward him or pretend to be surprised. But he solved it for her by walking directly over and holding the bag between them. I brought you some things, he said, quiet but steady. She blinked at the bag, then looked up at him. You came here? Where else would I be? She hesitated. This isn't your world. It is now. He didn't wait for permission, just motioned toward the benches. She sat first. He followed. For a moment, neither spoke. They just stared at the vinyl floor, then at each other. Finally, she broke the silence. You didn't have to do this. I know. But you did. He nodded. She lifted the bag and looked inside, fingers brushing over the pillow, the tea packets, the book. You read this? Only the first half. The rest scared me. That made her laugh, softly. A real one. The kind that reached her eyes. I've never had anyone bring me tea because they cared. You have now. She went quiet again, this time staring at the walls, tired beige, a faded poster of breastfeeding tips tacked up near the water dispenser. This place, it's not how I pictured raising kids. I don't want you here alone, he said. Not now. Not when there's something I can do. Her voice dropped. And what happens when you get bored of this? Of me? He looked at her carefully. I've had my share of distractions, but this isn't one of them. Then what is it? He leaned forward. It's real. That terrifies me more than anything I've ever built. She swallowed hard. Before either of them could speak again, the nurse called her name. Isolde Marin? She stood halfway, then paused. You want to come in? His brows lifted. Is that allowed? She nodded. You're listed as the father now. If you want to be. His chest tightened, but he stood without hesitation. I do. Inside the small exam room, the technician applied gel to her lower stomach. Isolde winced slightly, lifting her shirt. Caius sat at her side, jaw set, eyes fixed on the monitor. The screen flickered to life. 2 small forms appeared, floating, pulsing. There they are, the technician said gently. You're twins. Both measuring on track. Isolde inhaled sharply. Caius reached for her hand without thinking. She let him hold it. This one here is a bit more active, the technician said, pointing. And this one likes to tuck in under the rib. Like hiding? Caius asked. More like avoiding pressure. He stared at the shapes. Perfect, blurry, alive. I relate to that. Isolde turned her head to look at him. His grip didn't loosen. After the scan, they walked slowly through the clinic's back corridor, past a mural painted by local kids toward the parking lot. She paused near a community notice board. Flyers for prenatal yoga, parenting classes, food drives. You don't have to keep coming to these, she said softly. I want to. She looked down. That doesn't make it easier. I know, but it helps. He nodded. They stopped at her car, a second-hand hatchback, doors stiff, tires older than she'd admit. Caius didn't comment. Instead, he placed the bag in the back seat and turned to her. I'll wait as long as it takes, he said. Why? Because I see you. She blinked fast, eyes glossy. You didn't before. I didn't know how. She exhaled slowly. And now? Now I'm learning. As she drove off, he stood in the same spot until her car disappeared down the street. He didn't go back to the sedan. He stood there, alone in the lot, listening to the sound of neighborhood life all around him. For the first time, Caius Navarro wasn't running a system. He was part of something messy, beautiful, and human, and he wasn't walking away from it. Caius returned to the East Ala clinic the following week, not with a bag or a plan, but with presence. He hadn't told her he was coming. He didn't want this to be formal or prearranged. He just needed to see her again, without announcements, without strategy. Just real. He entered through the side door the receptionist now recognized him at. No questions, no protocol, just a polite nod and a whisper to Isolde, who was in the break room organizing prenatal pamphlets. She didn't look up when he walked in. You came back, she said quietly. I said I would. She flipped a brochure closed. Most people say things they don't mean. I mean every word with you. That's the problem. That caught her attention. She glanced at him from under her lashes, her hands pausing. What problem is that? That I used to control every part of my life. Now, I can't even predict the next sentence when I'm around you. She turned, arms crossed, brows lifted. You think unpredictability is a problem? I used to, but lately, I think it might be the only thing worth leaning into. Silence stretched between them like a line neither of them wanted to cut. Finally, she exhaled. I'm not looking for a hero, Caius. I'm not offering heroics. Then what are you offering? He took a step closer. Presence, consistency, a man who's willing to learn from his own silence. She blinked slowly. You've never said that before. I've never had a reason to. Her arms lowered slightly. Her eyes softened, but only just. I'm not the same woman you met in the wine gallery. I know. I'm not trying to make this easy for either of us. I don't need it to be easy. I just need it to be honest. The door behind them opened, and one of the midwives stepped in holding a folder. Isolde, we're ready for your stress test. You're on the schedule in 5 minutes. Isolde nodded. Thank you. As the midwife turned to leave, she glanced at Caius and smiled briefly. It's good to see the father involved. He didn't correct her, and Isolde didn't either. In the dimly lit examination room, a heart monitor clicked steadily in the background. Isolde lay reclined on a padded bench, a soft belt around her abdomen tracking the twins' movement. Caius sat beside her, watching, listening. One monitor pulsed with a quick rhythm. Then a second, slightly slower one, joined in. That's them, she said, pointing. Which is which? This one's more active. Probably the boy. And the other? More reserved, observant. Like someone I know. He chuckled under his breath. Are you comparing me to a fetus? She smiled. If the shoe fits. They both watched the blips on the screen for a long moment. Then he said, when I saw that report, I didn't feel fear. She turned toward him. I felt clarity. For once in my life, I ran because I wasn't ready to believe that. I don't blame you. I blamed myself. You were protecting something. She nodded. My sense of control. And now I'm learning how to live without it. When the test ended, she sat up slowly. Caius helped her off the bench, steadying her arm. She didn't resist. They walked back to the waiting area where a few expecting mothers sat with their partners. One of them, barely 20, cradling a round belly, looked at Isolde and asked, Is that your husband? Isolde hesitated. Caius didn't. Not yet, he said. Calm, direct. Isolde flushed. We're figuring it out. The young woman smiled. Well, you two look like you already have. They stepped outside into the warm afternoon. The air smelled faintly of street corn and car exhaust. A dog barked in the distance. I didn't expect to feel calm here, Caius admitted. Neither did I. Do you remember what you said that night, before you left the estate? She looked away, unsure. You said it was a mistake. She winced. He shook his head. You were wrong. She sighed. It wasn't meant to happen. No. But that doesn't mean it wasn't meant to matter. She leaned against the low brick wall outside the clinic, the heat of the sun warming her shoulders. I spent so long being careful, Caius. Careful not to feel, not to want, not to hope. That night, I wasn't careful. And now? He stepped closer. Now we have 2 children on the way, and I'm still trying to figure out if that makes me reckless or brave. Maybe both. She looked at him. This time, she didn't pull back. This time, when he reached for her hand, she let him take it. Across the street, a group of school kids laughed as they ran past, their backpacks bouncing, their joy loud and unfiltered. Caius watched them and whispered, Do you think they'll laugh like that? Our twins? She followed his gaze. If they're lucky, yes. I'll build a world where they can. Not with money, she said. No. With presence. She looked at him again. Then start showing up. I already have. They stood together in the sun, not as lovers, not yet as partners, but as 2 people who had stopped running and started listening. To heartbeats. To silence. To something they hadn't yet named. But it was growing. The rain had started just after 7. It wasn't the kind of storm that made headlines, just a steady, rhythmic drizzle, blanketing Los Angeles with a softness that felt more intimate than inconvenient. Streetlights glowed hazily through the mist, painting the sidewalks in glimmers of gold. Inside a modest family-owned restaurant tucked between a laundromat and a florist, Isolde sat in a corner booth near the window. The place was quiet, lit with warm sconces and humming with the sound of slow jazz and clinking silverware. She watched the raindrops slide down the glass, each one erasing a bit of the neon reflection outside. Caius arrived 5 minutes late, not because he didn't value punctuality, but because he had walked from 3 blocks away to clear his head, to feel something real, and because he knew if he drove up in his usual armored SUV, he'd bring too much of his world into hers. He stepped in with damp hair, the top few buttons of his shirt open, sleeves rolled. He looked more human than she'd ever seen him. She didn't speak. He didn't sit immediately. Instead, he looked around the small restaurant, the mismatched chairs, the laminated menus, the faded chalkboard listing the specials, and then finally at her. "You look comfortable here," he said. "I come here sometimes after clinic shifts." He slid into the booth across from her. "I can see why." The waitress approached, eyes widening when she recognized him, but she said nothing, just nodded, took their orders, and retreated with a polite smile. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that wasn't awkward, just unpracticed. Then Isolde spoke. "I didn't think you'd agree to this place. I wasn't looking for a view tonight. What were you looking for?" He met her eyes. "You. As you are." She glanced down, folding her hands over her belly. "I don't really know who that is anymore." "Then let's find out together." Their food came, grilled salmon for her, a simple steak for him. She hadn't eaten with an appetite in days, but something about the quiet hum of the space and the way he wasn't pushing made her shoulders relax. Between bites, he asked, "What's the first thing you remember wanting as a child?" She looked up, surprised. "That's your conversation starter?" He shrugged. "It's better than talking about contracts." She smirked, then thought for a moment. "A library card." He blinked. "Not toys?" "We didn't have books at home. I thought getting a card meant I could keep the stories." He nodded, absorbing that. "And now? Now I want safety, a space where I don't have to explain myself." He placed his fork down gently. "That's what I want to give them. Not just security, safety, from judgment, from absence." She watched him for a moment, then said softly, "What's the first thing you remember wanting?" He didn't answer right away. Then, peace. "But I didn't know what that meant until recently." "Does it scare you?" The rain continued outside, soft and persistent. A young couple danced outside under the awning across the street, spinning, laughing, soaked. Isolde smiled faintly at the sight. Caius watched her instead. "You do that," he said. "What?" "Smile like you don't know anyone's watching." She looked at him. "Because I'm used to being invisible." He leaned forward. "Not to me. They paid in cash." Her insistence. "You're not buying my time," she said. "I wasn't trying to." "I know, but I had to say it anyway." They stepped out under the shared cover of his umbrella. The sidewalk shimmered with reflections of street lamps and brake lights. A puddle mirrored their feet as they walked, not rushing. At the corner, she stopped. "You're different here," she said. "I'm trying to be present. That's different for me." She nodded. "I like this version. It's always been in me." He opened the passenger door of a waiting cab, but she didn't get in immediately. Instead, she turned to him, raindrops clinging to her lashes. "I don't know what we're doing. We're making space for what could be." She hesitated. "Caius." "Yes? If this is a phase for you, walk away now. I can't afford fantasy." His answer came with zero hesitation. "It's not a phase. It's the first thing I've wanted that has nothing to do with control." She studied him. Then, softly, "I want to believe that." "Then let me show you." She stepped into the cab. He didn't follow, just watched until the taillights disappeared into the rain. And for the first time, the space she left behind didn't feel empty. It felt like promise. The call came just after 11:30 p.m. Caius was reviewing a late-night engineering update on the new neural interface software when his phone buzzed. It wasn't a number he recognized. It was her. He didn't answer immediately. Not because he didn't want to, but because he wasn't sure what her calling at that hour meant. Then he picked up. "Sold?" Her voice was clear but cautious. "I need your help. If it's not too late." He was already reaching for his keys. "Tell me where." 15 minutes later, they met in the fluorescent glow of an all-night baby boutique in Westwood, the kind of store that never advertised but stayed open for night shift nurses. exhausted new parents, and the occasional billionaire with odd hours. Isolde stood just inside, arms wrapped around herself, her belly more prominent beneath a soft gray hoodie. He walked in and didn't say a word, just joined her. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Me neither. I was thinking about cribs, safety ratings, mattress firmness. Things I know nothing about." He nodded. "Same." A soft laugh slipped out of her. "So we're both clueless." He smirked. "But we showed up." They wandered through the aisles in silence at first. Tiny socks in pastel rows, bottles lined up like tools, rockers that promised better sleep, changing tables that folded into wall units. He watched her run her hand along the edge of a whitewashed wooden crib. "This one's simple," she said. "It's sturdy, not flashy, but elegant." They both paused. "It's them," he said. She nodded. "Yeah. It is." They marked it for purchase, then moved on. In the diaper aisle, she picked up a pack and turned it over. "Do you think we'll survive the first 3 months?" "Define survive." She grinned. "Get through it without losing our minds." He considered. "I once stayed up 48 hours debugging a collapsed server during an international launch. I can handle screaming. These will be smaller. Louder. I'll adapt." She looked at him sideways. "You're not scared?" "I'm terrified. But I want to be." "Why?" "Because fear makes me honest." They passed the strollers next. Isolde paused at a compact twin version, sleek, lightweight. "I've seen this one in parenting blogs," she said. "It folds one-handed." Caius tilted his head. "Does it hover, fly, make coffee?" She elbowed him, laughing. "It turns corners smoothly." "Sold." He flagged a clerk with a quiet nod. "We'll take it." Isolde raised an eyebrow. "You didn't even look at the price tag." He looked at her. "What's peace of mind worth?" She didn't answer, but she smiled. In the back corner, they found the book section. Titles like What to Expect and The Honest Guide to Parenting sat beside plush animals and lullaby CDs. She reached for a small board book with bold colors. "This was my favorite as a kid. My aunt brought it from the UK when I was 5. He glanced over her shoulder. "We'll need 2 copies." "For each twin?" "For each of us. I should probably start from the basics." Her fingers brushed his. She didn't pull away. By the time they reached the checkout, the clerk, an older woman with gray, streaks in her hair and a face that said she'd seen many 2 a.m. shopping emergencies, eyed them kindly. "Expecting twins?" she asked, scanning the barcode on the stroller. Isolde nodded. "Yes." "First-time parents?" Caius didn't miss a beat. "Yes." The woman smiled. "You're doing fine already. You showed up. That's half the battle." Isolde looked down at the counter. Caius looked at her, and for the first time, the word "we didn't" feel forced. They loaded the items into the trunk of a car she didn't recognize. It wasn't his usual armored vehicle. This one was more understated. More normal. She leaned against the passenger door before getting in. "You know, when I imagined being a mother, this wasn't the scenario. Same. I thought I'd have a plan, a husband, stability. I thought I'd avoid this part of life entirely. And now?" He looked at her directly. "Now I'm glad we didn't get what we expected." She exhaled, long and quiet. "Me too." Back at her apartment, he carried the stroller box to her doorstep. "You don't have to. I want to." They stood there for a beat, rain beginning to mist again in the distance. She didn't invite him in. He didn't ask. But before she turned to unlock the door, she said, "Thank you. For tonight. For not trying too hard. I'm learning that the right things don't need force." She nodded, keys in hand, then paused. "I don't know if I'm ready to give you everything. I'm not asking for everything. What are you asking for?" He stepped closer, not touching, but near. "A chance to prove this isn't temporary." She looked up at him, lips parted, breath shallow. And for the first time since that night in the East Wing, she let herself imagine forever. A week after their late-night shopping trip, the crib parts remained, in their boxes, lined neatly against the wall of Isolde's living room. She hadn't asked him to return and assemble them, but she knew he would, if she asked. But she wasn't sure what she wanted him to build first, the cribs or the trust, so she waited. Isolde spent most of that afternoon rearranging furniture, vacuuming corners, folding tiny clothes. Nesting, the doctor had called it. It wasn't just instinct, it was self-preservation. Assembling a life meant creating space, not only for babies, but for choices. And she needed clarity before she let him back into hers. Her phone buzzed. A simple message dinner. Just us. Neutral ground. Tonight. She stared at it, then typed back, "Only if I set the terms." They met on the rooftop of a midtown art center that overlooked the city skyline. No paparazzi, no board members, just string lights swaying in the early evening breeze and the smell of wood-fired flatbread from the chef's open kitchen. She arrived in a simple dress, flowing, breathable, no makeup, her hair tied low. He stood when he saw her, dark slacks, rolled sleeves, no tie. He looked less like a mogul and more like a man trying to meet her halfway. "You picked this place?" she asked. He nodded. "It has no expectations." They sat, and for a long while they ate without speaking. The silence wasn't tense. It was spacious, protective. Then she placed her fork down. "I have conditions." He met her eyes. "Tell me." "I need freedom, to still be me, not an accessory to your life. Granted, I won't disappear again, but I can't promise comfort. Pregnancy is unpredictable. I'll need space to breathe, and sometimes I'll push you away just to test if you'll stay. I'll stay, and when I don't have the answers, I need you to not fix it. Just sit with me in it." He didn't hesitate. "I will." She studied him. "And one more thing. Yes, I don't want a ring because of responsibility, or guilt, or fear of headlines. You won't get one for any of those reasons. Then why would you give it to me?" He stood, reached into his jacket, and then didn't pull anything out. Instead, he walked around to her side of the table and knelt, slowly, deliberately, on one knee. "I won't propose tonight," he said. "Not because I don't want to, but because I've learned that love requires consent at every step. You gave me your terms. Here's mine. I'm here, fully. When you're ready, you'll let me know. And I'll already be home." Tears blurred her eyes before she could stop them. "That's not fair," she whispered. "What isn't? Making me want to say yes before I've even seen the ring." He smiled. "You'll design it, remember?" She laughed, wiping her cheek. "You really mean that? I want to build something that fits you, not just your finger." She touched his shoulder. "Okay," she said softly. "Then help me build the cribs tomorrow." He stood. "I'll bring coffee and power tools." The next morning, the soft clatter of boxes opening echoed through her apartment. They worked side by side, him reading instructions with military precision, her adjusting screws when he tightened them too far. It was clumsy, noisy, imperfect, and absolutely real. When the final piece snapped into place, she stood back and looked at the twin cribs side by side against the wall. One pale blue blanket, one soft peach. She turned to him. "They're going to be loud and stubborn and needy, like us. And you're still here." He looked at her, hand resting on the crib rail. "I'm not leaving, ever." She stepped closer. "Then you don't need a ring yet," she said, eyes searching his. "What do I need?" She reached for his hand, placed it over her stomach. "Just keep showing up." He leaned down, pressed his forehead to hers, and whispered, "I will, every day." And for the first time, she believed him. By Monday morning, the story was everywhere. It started with a blurry photo, Caius Navarro stepping out of a community prenatal clinic with a visibly pregnant woman. No captions, no context, just grainy pixels and speculative headlines. Tech billionaire's mystery visit. Baby on the way? Navarro spotted at clinic. Who is she? Fatherhood or fling fallout? Caius saw the headlines while reviewing quarterly reports at his desk. His assistant hovered in the doorway, tablet in hand, eyes filled with the kind of panic that came with PR fires. "Do you want to draft a statement, sir?" "No." No comment. "None. But the board." "I'll speak to them directly." The assistant hesitated. "Understood." He closed the report and stood, walking to the window. Below, the city moved without care, unbothered by narratives manufactured above it. He wasn't surprised, just annoyed by the invasion, by the assumptions, and most of all, by how quickly the world tried to assign motives to something they couldn't understand. Meanwhile, Isolde stood outside the pharmacy, clutching a paper bag of prenatal vitamins. When she saw the headline on someone's phone screen beside her in line, she didn't react, didn't panic. But when she got home, her phone had 4 missed calls, 2 from numbers she didn't recognize, 1 from her cousin in Malta and 1 from the clinic administrator. She put the phone down and sat. The public had found them. That night, Caius gathered his executive board in the West Conference Room. No formal agenda, no media handlers, just him and the truth. The room was full of murmurs and half-concealed glances as he stepped to the head of the table. "I assume you've all seen the articles," he began. Silence. Then a senior board member leaned forward. "Are they accurate?" "Yes." "You're having children?" "Yes." "With her?" He locked eyes with the man. "Her name is Isolde Marin. She's a nurse, a former House staff member, and a woman who deserves more respect than that question gave her." Murmurs again. Another voice. "Is this going to be a distraction? Investors are already asking." Caius raised a hand. "There will be no statement, no tabloid games, no damage control. This isn't a scandal. It's a family matter." A woman at the far end of the table crossed her arms. "And how do you plan to balance both?" He didn't blink. "With precision. The same way I built this company." Silence returned, this time heavier. He continued, "Anyone who believes parenthood compromises leadership is free to resign today. But understand this, I don't abandon my responsibilities, not in business and not in life." The meeting ended 10 minutes later. Not one person left their seat early. Isolde turned off her phone for 2 days. She needed quiet. Not to escape, but to remember who she was outside of a headline. She went for long walks, hands resting on her belly, her headphones filled with classical music and breathing exercises. The world could spin all it wanted. She had twins to protect. Not just their lives, but the way they entered the world. On the 3rd day, Caius knocked on her door. No driver, no security, just him. She opened it slowly, uncertain. "I thought you'd be buried in meetings," she said. "I was. And now? I'm here." She stepped aside. "You saw the articles?" "I saw them. And the board? They got answers." She folded her arms. "And what did you say about me?" "I told them you're the strongest person I've ever met." That made her look away. He stepped closer. "You don't owe anyone an explanation, but they'll come for me anyway. They'll try. But I'm not leaving you to face that alone." She hesitated. "They don't see me as an equal, Caius. Not your world, not your circle. Then I'll make a new circle." Her eyes flickered. "You don't have to fix it," she said. "I'm not fixing it. I'm standing beside you." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded, barely. "Then stay for dinner," she said. "Only if you let me cook." She blinked. "You know how to cook?" "I can read instructions." She smiled. "All right, chef. Impress me." An hour later, the kitchen was filled with the scent of over-simmered pasta, slightly burnt garlic bread, and laughter. Real, relaxed, uncontrolled. He wore an apron that read, "Bless this mess." She didn't take a photo. She just watched and thought, maybe this wouldn't be so bad. As they sat on the couch afterward, her legs curled beneath her, he reached for her hand. "They'll talk," he said. "Let them. We can stay quiet, or we can tell our story our way." She raised a brow. "You want to speak publicly." "When the time is right. And until then?" He looked at her. "Until then, we write the real version. Every day." The email came from an independent journalist, not a gossip columnist, not a corporate puppet. Just a woman named Dara Wynn who had been covering maternal health for over a decade. Subject: interview request. Respectfully yours message, Ms. Marin. I'd like to speak with you about your experience, not as the woman carrying Caius Navarro's twins, but as a nurse, a future mother, and a woman with her own story. Off record if preferred. You have the right to narrate your life in your own words. Sincerely, Dara. Isolde read the message 3 times before she replied with a single line. "1 coffee, no cameras. If I feel unsafe, I leave." They met at a quiet cafe on 3rd Street. No paparazzi, no press vans, just a few tables filled with students, old couples, and laptop freelancers. The cafe owner, a retired professor, greeted them both like regulars and left them alone. Dara was soft-spoken. Pen and pad, no recorder, no big purse with hidden mics. Just real questions, and space to answer them. "I'm not interested in the scandal," she said. I'm interested in how you kept breathing when the world decided to make you a headline. Isolde stirred her tea slowly. I didn't expect to be anyone's story. And yet now, you're everyone's. She looked up. That's not my fault. It isn't. They sat for a moment, the hum of espresso machines filling the air. Do you love him? Dara asked gently. Isolde didn't flinch. It's not about that right now. Then what is it about? It's about safety, about stability, about showing up when no one tells you to. Has he? Yes. Did you expect him to? No. Dara scribbled something down, then looked up. What was the hardest part? Isolde hesitated, being doubted before I even spoke. By whom? Everyone. Strangers, friends, myself. And now? I don't need their permission anymore. The interview only lasted 30 minutes. When it ended, Dara didn't ask for a follow-up. She didn't chase a juicy soundbite. She just stood and said, if you ever want to tell more, on your own terms, I'll make sure they listen. Isolde nodded, then whispered, thank you. For asking like a human. The article dropped quietly 2 days later, published in a women's health journal, not a celebrity blog. Title, not a headline, a heartbeat. It didn't include the twins' due date. Didn't mention the estate, not even one photo, just quotes about a girl who left Malta with nursing dreams and found herself in the quiet rooms of a mansion, scrubbing wine off marble to pay exam fees, about the night she lost control and found a version of herself she hadn't planned for, about the moment she heard 2 heartbeats and knew life would never return to its original design. The article ended with her quote, I am not a scandal. I am a mother, and I'm choosing this story even if it scares me. Caius read it in his office alone. He didn't call her. He didn't text. Instead, he left a single rose on her doorstep that evening, no note attached. She opened the door, looked down at the flower, and didn't need a message to know who it came from. The article made small waves, but its ripple touched the right people. Mothers in online groups began posting #NotAheadline beneath their stories of unexpected pregnancies, silent sacrifices, and rediscovered courage. Isolde didn't post anything herself, but she read every tag, every caption, every comment from women who said, thank you for reminding us we're more than our mistakes. A week later, the clinic director called her into the office. I read the article, she said. Isolde braced herself. I'd like to offer you a full-time position, lead coordinator, paid training for maternal triage certification. Isolde blinked. I thought, we see who shows up. Not just once, but every day. She didn't know what to say. So she nodded and exhaled. That evening, she told Caius. He smiled, full and proud, the kind of smile he never gave in photos. You did this, she said. No, he replied. You just finally stopped hiding. She glanced at the rose, still on her counter. Maybe I'll start buying flowers, she teased. I'd like that. You. He shrugged. I'm learning. That night, as she fell asleep, the twins kicked at the same time. And for the first time, she whispered, this is our life now, and I think I want all of it. It was nearly midnight when the lights in Isolde's apartment dimmed to a soft amber glow. The living room, once filled with unopened boxes and nervous energy, now felt lived in, warm, slow, deliberate. She lay propped up in bed, a pillow tucked between her knees, another under her back. The 3rd trimester had come with all its promises, swollen ankles, restless sleep, and the humbling art of breathing in short bursts. Across the room, Caius stood barefoot near the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of water. He moved with quiet ease now, not like a guest, not like a CEO, but like a man, who knew where everything was and didn't need to ask for permission anymore. Are they moving? He asked as he crossed the room. They never stop, she said, adjusting slightly. The girl is an acrobat. The boy kicks like he's trying to negotiate his way out early. He chuckled as he handed her the water. That's my son, and my daughter, apparently, is training for the Olympics. He sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle her too much. She took a sip, then leaned her head back against the headboard. You look tired, he said softly. I'm fine. You don't have to be. I know. There was a pause, a gentle stillness. Then she asked, what were you like as a baby? Caius blinked, caught off guard. No one's ever asked me that. I'm asking now. He rubbed his jaw. My mother used to say I didn't cry, not even once. She thought I was broken. Were you? He met her eyes. I was observing. Some things never change. Some things do. She smiled. What about your dad? He looked down. Not much of a presence. He was always away. Meetings, projects, important calls. The kind of man who paid for private schools but never showed up for graduation. Isolde reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. I won't be him, he said. I know. You'll have me, every day, and so will they. Her fingers tightened. That's the first time you've said that out loud, because now it's true. The twins shifted again. She winced, adjusting her position. Here, he said. Let me. Caius moved to kneel beside the bed and placed both hands gently on her belly. She watched him, not because she expected anything, but because something about seeing him, like that, grounded and quiet, made her chest ache in a different way. A good way. You feel that? She asked. He nodded. Strong. Like they're talking to you. He glanced up. What do you think they're saying? She smirked. Probably something like, you'd better not mess this up, old man. He laughed. The sound was deep and rare. She hadn't heard it like that since that first night, the one they didn't talk about. Anymore, not because it hurt, but because everything after it had grown louder. I wonder what they'll be like, she said after a while. Loud, opinionated, resilient, beautiful, exhausting, perfect. She turned to him. I want them to know softness, even in this world. They will, and I want them to know their father. Not just his title. They will. In every story we share here on CedarLight Love Stories, there's a lesson, a spark, or a gentle reminder about what love truly means. But what about you? Do you believe love can heal old wounds, or does it sometimes leave scars that never fade? Share your feelings in the comments below, and let's start a heartfelt conversation together. Don't forget, your voice makes this space shine brighter. Don't forget to subscribe. She studied him. You always speak in absolutes. He nodded. Because I only say what I'll make true. There was a pause. Then she placed her hand on top of his, both resting over her belly now. They already know you're here, she whispered. Outside the rain returned, light against the windows, tapping in a rhythm that matched the quiet rise and fall of her breath. Inside, they didn't need to fill the space. No declarations, no promises hanging in the air, just two hands. One heartbeat, then another, and two lives forming in the in-between. She drifted to sleep shortly after, her body giving in at last. Caius stayed seated at her bedside, one hand still cradling her belly, the other resting over her wrist. He didn't check his phone, didn't open his email, didn't think about tomorrow's schedules or global markets or quarterly reports. For the first time in his life, the only thing he needed to manage was right here, breathing, growing, beating beneath his palm. And in that quiet moment, he understood something. Legacy wasn't the empire you left behind. It was the people you stayed for. It started with a tightening. Not pain exactly, just pressure that crept along Isolde's lower back and into her belly like a belt cinching itself. She paused mid-step in the kitchen, one hand braced against the counter, the other pressed against her side. Caius looked up from the living room, where he'd been sketching out a mock layout for the nursery on a tablet. You all right? He asked, already rising. She nodded, slowly. Just tightness. Probably Braxton Hicks. He was at her side in 3 seconds. You're sure? Pretty sure. They come and go. He reached for her arm, steadying her gently. How often? She glanced at the clock. First one was 20 minutes ago. I didn't say anything. He didn't argue. Didn't scold. Instead, he helped her to the couch, eased her down, and fetched a glass of water without being asked. You've been reading those prep books I gave you, she said with a faint smile. I read all of them. She raised a brow. Even the parts about mucus plugs and perineal massage? He winced. Some things can't be unread. She laughed, then winced again. Another tightening. This one stronger. He placed his hand on her belly. Call the clinic? Not yet. Hospital bag? Already packed. She nodded toward the closet. Caius moved like a man trained for a mission. Overnight bag, backup charger. Her ID, insurance card, prenatal folder. By the time the next contraction came, 7 minutes later, he was slipping her shoes on her feet. The car ride was quiet, broken only by her controlled breathing and the distant sound of rain tapping the roof. The city was still awake, but it felt far away, muted behind the tinted windows and their shared silence. At a red light, she gripped the armrest. Her jaw clenched. This one was sharper. He reached for her hand. She took it. Squeezed. Hard. "You're doing great," he said softly. "I'm not even at the hospital yet, and already stronger than anyone I know." The triage nurse at the hospital recognized them instantly. No questions about insurance, no questions about who he was, but all the focus was on her, right where it should be. In the labor room, the monitors were strapped on. Heartbeats appeared on the screen. Twin rhythms. Fast. Healthy. 4 centimeters, the nurse said. "She's in early labor. With twins, things can go quickly or slowly. We monitor. We wait." Isolde nodded, lips pressed thin. Caius stood nearby, hands clasped in front of him, every muscle tense. He had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions with more composure. Now he was useless, except for being there. And maybe that was enough. 3 a.m. 4. She dozed in 10-minute bursts between contractions. He never left her side. Not to answer a call, not to refill his coffee, not even when one of his executives texted twice with the word urgent. None of it mattered. Only the lines on the monitor, only her hand in his, only her eyes, glazed with exhaustion and still somehow full of fire. At 7 a.m., her water broke. There was no drama, no scream, just a low groan, a wince, and then, "It's time, isn't it?" He nodded. Yes. The delivery room was cold, bright, and filled with motion. Nurses, monitors, obs, a second team waiting for the second twin. Isolde gritted her teeth through the pressure, sweat lining her forehead, hands gripping the railings. Caius stood at her side, gloved, gowned, and completely undone. "Breathe," the nurse said. Just like that. "You're doing beautifully." Another contraction hit. Isolde screamed, once, raw and defiant. "Push," the doctor commanded. And she did. At 8:14 a.m., the first cry filled the room. A boy. Full lungs. Sharp cry. Dark eyes like midnight. They laid him on her chest. She wept. So did Caius. But there was no time to linger. "Second baby's coming," the doctor warned. Next contraction. Isolde nodded. No rest. No rest. She took his hand again. He leaned in. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." At 8:26 a.m., the room heard a second cry. A girl. Delicate brows. Quiet stare. Hands curled into perfect fists. When they placed her beside her brother, the babies instinctively turned toward each other, forehead to forehead. As if they already knew, we were never meant to arrive alone. Caius kissed Isolde's forehead as tears fell freely. "They're perfect." She turned to him, voice hoarse. "Name them." He looked down at the boy. "Soren." Then the girl. "Leora." She smiled through her exhaustion. "Those are beautiful. They're us," he said. "Everything good about us." She closed her eyes as the babies were cleaned and swaddled. Caius stood over them, heart thudding against his ribs. He reached out, picked them up one by one, and placed them gently in the bassinet beside her. He didn't say anything profound. Didn't need to. Because in that moment, amid the noise, the tears, and the hospital beeps, he knew something had shifted permanently. This wasn't the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of a life he hadn't realized he'd been waiting for. The room had quieted. After the final checks, measurements, and newborn screenings, the nurses gave a nod of approval and gently dimmed the overhead lights. What had moments ago been an urgent, bustling chamber of monitors and commands now settled into something more sacred. Isolde was exhausted, limbs heavy, eyelids fighting to stay open, but her arms instinctively formed a cradle as the nurse placed both babies in her grasp. Soren was already trying to root, head nudging against his sister's wrapped shoulder. Leora, smaller but alert, blinked up at her mother with wide, unblinking eyes. Isolde didn't cry again. Not yet. She was too overwhelmed for tears. Caius stood at the edge of the bed, his hands braced on the rails, his chest rising and falling like he'd just finished a marathon. He wasn't sure what he felt. He just knew nothing in his life had ever looked like this. Nothing had ever been so weightless and terrifying at the same time. He reached forward, brushing one finger against Soren's cheek. The baby turned toward the touch. "Already looking for you," Isolde whispered, her voice dry and soft. Caius looked at her. "Are you okay?" I don't know, she said truthfully. But they are. That was enough. The attending nurse returned with hospital bracelets and a clipboard. Time to finalize names and file the certificates, she said gently. Isolde shifted upright, as much as her body allowed. He named them, she murmured, nodding toward Caius. The nurse smiled. All right. Spellings? Soren, Caius said, steady now. S-O-R-E-N, Liora. L-I-O-R-A. The nurse jotted them down, clipped the bracelets onto tiny wrists, and handed the final copies over. Father's name, Caius Emmanuel Navarro. Mother's name, Isolde Therese Morin. 2 lines, 2 souls, and a life that had just changed shape forever. Later that evening, Isolde drifted in and out of sleep, while Caius rocked Soren gently in a chair by the window. Liora slept soundly in the bassinet beside her. Golden streaks of sunset lit the room in calm color. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly, speaking more to himself than anyone else. But I'm here, and I swear to you, little man, I'll figure it out. Soren gurgled softly, one hand flexing in the air. Caius smiled. You already don't believe me, do you? A voice behind him answered. He will. Isolde was awake now, watching him. She reached her arm out across the blanket. Bring him. He did. And when both babies were in her arms again, she said, Hold them with me. He slid in beside her, half sitting on the bed, wrapping one arm around her back, the other cradling Leora's swaddled weight. For a long time, they didn't speak. They just stared at what they'd created, at what they'd become. The night nurse peeked in hours later and froze. Not because of protocol, but because of the sight. The billionaire tech mogul, once tabloid stiff and surgically guarded, now fast asleep in a narrow hospital bed, forehead resting against the crown of his newborn daughter's head. And Isolde, head leaned on his shoulder, lips barely parted, both babies in her arms. No walls, no cameras, no script, just one mother, one father, and 2 hearts beginning. The next morning, Caius woke before everyone else. He stretched, blinked against the early light, and watched as Leora shifted in her sleep, her hand brushing against her brother's chin. He stood, walked to the small bathroom mirror, and stared at himself. There were circles under his eyes. His hair was a mess, and for once he looked exactly like who he wanted to be. At 10 a.m., with the hospital staff gathered nearby and Isolde resting in bed, Caius did something no one expected. He knelt, right there on the sterile tile floor. No ring, no spotlight, just sincerity. I know this isn't where most people propose, he said, voice steady but low. But I don't need chandeliers or cameras. I just need the woman who gave me the only 2 reasons I'll ever need to become a better man. Isolde stared at him, lips parted. He continued, not because of obligation, not because it's expected, but because I never stopped wanting the night we shared to be the beginning of something real. He reached for her hand. I know you're tired, and this moment is yours, but if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life learning how to love you the way you deserve. Tears filled her eyes, and for once, she didn't try to blink them away. I thought you were going to wait until I was ready, she whispered. I was, until I realized readiness doesn't come. You just leap. She squeezed his hand. Her voice shook. Then catch me. There was no flash of diamond, no velvet box, no camera crew waiting outside the door, just the smell of antiseptic, the beeping of newborn heart monitors, and the soft rustle of hospital sheets. Caius was still on one knee, not just offering marriage, but surrender, stripped of performance, stripped of ego, just a man asking the mother of his children if she'd choose him not, because she had to, but because maybe, just maybe, she wanted to. Isolde looked down at him, eyes red with sleep, hormones, and disbelief. Her body was still recovering, her skin damp with the remnants of labor. She didn't look like the glowing brides in magazines. But to Caius, she had never looked more powerful, more radiant, more necessary. A nurse stood frozen in the corner of the room, IV tray in hand, eyes wide. Caius glanced up. Give us a moment? The nurse nodded, quickly retreating, whispering something excited to another just outside the door. But he didn't care who overheard. He only saw her. Isolde leaned back slightly, her eyes full of conflicting emotions. I just gave birth 12 hours ago, she said, voice half laughing. I noticed. You're seriously proposing here? I'm not here for the aesthetic. I'm here because it's real. She looked at the babies, both sleeping soundly in the transparent bassinets beside her bed. Her voice dropped. This doesn't mean it's going to be easy. I'm not asking for easy. I'm still scared. I'll stand with you through all of it. She stared at him, then said quietly, I don't have a dress. I don't have a ring. We're a mess, but it's ours, he said, and I want to keep building it. She reached out her hand slowly, palm up. He rose from the floor and slid his fingers into hers. He didn't kiss her. He didn't rush. She guided his hand to her cheek, eyes fluttering closed as his thumb gently stroked her skin. Okay, she whispered. We'll figure it out. That's a yes? That's a let's begin. By late afternoon, the hospital staff had caught wind of the proposal. Not because of a press leak, but because the nurses couldn't stop smiling every time they stepped into the room. Isolde didn't put on makeup or change her gown. She held both babies in her arms, her hair still in a sleep braid. But she glowed, not from glamour, but from something steadier. Presence. Peace. Caius called his assistant only once to cancel his meetings for the next 2 weeks. Sir, that's the quarterly board review. I won't be there. Should I say why? Yes. Tell them I'm on paternity leave. And tell them the next time they ask about my family, they better address them by name. Yes, sir. That night, the twins were taken briefly to the nursery for their final checkups. Isolde sat up in bed, sipping warm water, while Caius unfolded a small white envelope. What's that? She asked. A gift. I thought we weren't doing any more surprises. It's not for you, he said. It's from you. She looked puzzled. He turned the envelope around. Her handwriting. She blinked. That's my letter to myself, from my licensing journal. I found it in your old locker, he said, folded between anatomy notes and a recipe for lemon broth. You kept it? He nodded. I read it before every investor pitch. It reminded me what grounded looks like. She shook her head. You're full of contradictions. He reached for her hand again. So are you. Before the lights dimmed for the night, the nurse brought the twins back in. Leora yawned, stretching like a cat. Soren blinked once, then immediately latched onto Isolde's pinky. Caius stood back and watched, then said softly, Do you want Navarro as their last name? She looked up. I hadn't thought about that. It's not a claim. I just want them to know I'm theirs, in name, in action. She nodded. Then yes, let's make it official. First thing in the morning. As the room dimmed and the twins settled into their side-by-side bassinets, Caius pulled a chair close to the bed. Not to rest, just to be there. Isolde turned her head toward him. We'll probably mess up. Definitely. We'll argue. We already do. But we'll keep choosing. Every time. She smiled, then whispered, Good night, fiancé. He grinned. That word will never get old. And in the quiet of that hospital room, surrounded by monitors, formula samples, and 2 lives just beginning, they sealed something stronger than any signature. Not perfection, not fantasy, just commitment, the kind that holds. The day they brought the twins home, the air felt too still, like the world outside hadn't caught on that something extraordinary had just happened. No camera crews, no announcement, just a quiet sedan pulling into a gated estate where 2 bassinets now took up most of the back seat. Isolde sat beside them, eyes darting between Soren and Leora every few seconds. She looked less like a passenger and more like a soldier returning from battle, exhausted but fiercely alert. Caius drove, one hand on the wheel, the other ready to reach for her if needed. He hadn't spoken much since they left the hospital, not out of discomfort but reverence. The moment didn't need decoration. At the gate, the security guard's voice crackled through the intercom. Welcome home, Mr. Navarro. He glanced at Isolde in the mirror. Welcome home, he echoed. Inside, the estate had transformed. What was once sleek and minimalist now pulsed with new softness. The nursery had been completed while they were gone. Pale wood cribs, blackout curtains, a plush armchair for feedings. Even the hallway held signs of change. Baby monitors mounted discreetly, a white noise machine humming faintly. And a floral arrangement that wasn't there before, delivered by Isolde's colleagues from the clinic. She stepped in first, cradling Leora. Caius followed with Soren. Neither spoke as they crossed the threshold, but something inside both of them shifted. This wasn't a house anymore. It was theirs, The first hour passed in a blur of unpacking, feeding, diapering, swaddling. Isolde moved on instinct, gently cooing and checking swaddles with clockwork efficiency. Caius followed instructions, held them as directed, and wrote everything down in a notebook. Times, ounces, cries. "You're tracking?" she asked. "Pattern detection." She smiled. "You're such a machine." "I'm trying to become something else." By midnight, both twins were asleep. It wouldn't last. But for now, the house exhaled. Isolde lay on the couch with a heating pad at her lower back, legs stretched out, a throw blanket tangled around her. Caius returned from the kitchen with 2 mugs of warm ginger tea, her preference since the last trimester. He handed her one. "How's your pain?" "Tolerable." "And your heart?" She looked at him over the rim of the mug. "More full than I thought it could be." He sat beside her. "Close, but not crowding. I keep waiting to mess it all up," he admitted. "You will." "That obvious?" "No," she said. "But you're human now. That's new for you." He looked at her. "Do you forgive me?" "For what?" "For how I didn't see you before, when you were scrubbing floors, holding your breath around me." She set the mug down. "I never held my breath," she replied. "I just didn't expect you to notice. And now? Now I see that you're trying." He looked down at his hands. "I'm not used to needing grace." "Good," she whispered, "because I'm not offering it cheaply." They shared a soft silence. Then she leaned her head on his shoulder. At 2:30 a.m., Leora stirred, then Soren, then the room exploded into twin cries. Caius shot up as if responding to a fire alarm. Isolde groaned. "I'll get Soren," she said, already swinging her legs over the edge of the couch. "I've got Leora." They moved in tandem. He grabbed a pre-warmed bottle. She changed a diaper one-handed. He bounced in the nursery. She sang low melodies from her childhood. By the time both twins settled again, they were both standing in the dim nursery light, backs aching, shirts wrinkled, and eyes bloodshot. "You good?" he asked. "Barely," she said, laughing. I think I just burped a baby for the first time in my life. And you survived." "Barely." They both laughed, softly, tiredly, but it felt like victory. At dawn, they lay together on the nursery floor, babies back in their cribs, both too wired to sleep, but too tired to talk. Caius turned his head to face her. "I want to build a morning ritual," he murmured. She raised a brow. "What kind?" "Coffee." 1 minute of silence, 2 honest words. She smiled, eyes barely open. "Go first." Grateful, humbled. She reached for his hand, still sprawled between them. Mine, present, home. They didn't say anything more. Above them, the sun bled slowly into the curtains. The world was still there. Headlines, meetings, expectations. But down here, on this floor, under 2 small cribs, next to the woman who had changed the entire arc of his life, Caius Navarro was not CEO or empire builder. He was just a man, trying, loving, learning. The sunlight streaming into the nursery that morning was different. Not just warmer, but intentional. Like the room itself knew it had a purpose now, and had invited the light in as a witness. Isolde stood by the window, rocking Leora gently in her arms, while Soren slept curled in a moon-shaped bassinet nearby. The soft hum of white noise filled the space, mixing with the faint rustle of trees outside. Caius entered quietly, a small cardboard box in hand. "What's that?" she asked, keeping her voice low. "A kit." "For what?" He set it down on the floor beside her. "For painting." She blinked. "You're going to paint? In here?" He nodded. "I want them to grow up surrounded by things we touched." She tilted her head. "You're aware this is a newborn room and not an art studio?" I read 5 articles. "I'm ready." She laughed softly. "This I have to see." They set up the tarp and opened the tiny cans of baby-safe paint. 1 soft blue, 1 muted coral, and 1 ivory. Caius had ordered stencils, stars, clouds, leafy vines. "You thought of everything," she said, smoothing tape along the edges of the wall. "I had help from a very enthusiastic woman at the craft store." "Was she into you?" "She was into her commission." Isolde grinned. Smart woman. They worked slowly, trading brushes, laughing when Caius accidentally left a blue thumbprint above the closet. "Maybe we should leave it," she said. "Symbol of chaos?" "Symbol of presence." He didn't argue. By noon, one wall had transformed into a mural of vines growing from the floorboards and curling upward, some ending in little painted hearts, others in soft bursts of leaves. They didn't try for perfection. They tried for personality. This one, Isolde said, pointing to a small heart nestled near the crib, is for Leora. She found me when I was starting to forget myself. And this one, Caius said, dabbing a swirl over the light switch, is for Soren, because he'll always find the edge of a room and push further. She looked over her shoulder at him. You talk like a poet now. I've been listening to you. Her expression shifted, something warmer, deeper. She dipped her brush again and added a line above the crib in her own careful script. Welcome to the world. We're learning with you. Later that evening, they laid on the nursery rug, backs against a row of pillows, the twins in their bassinets nearby. Caius held a sketch pad on his knees. You're still drawing? She asked, surprised. I like mapping things. Let me guess. Feeding patterns? Diaper change intervals? No, he said, turning the pad around. Nursery name ideas. She sat up, intrigued. At the top he had written, what do we call their world? Below it, several ideas. The nest, the quiet place, sunroom, the grove, twinlight. Isolde's brows lifted at the last one. Twinlight? He shrugged. It's a stretch, a mashup. She smiled. It's sweet. Sounds like something from a children's book. Then maybe we're on the right path. She reached for the pad, adding her own idea in looping handwriting. The beginning room. He stared at it. That's perfect. It's what this is, the beginning, for all of us. The next morning, a small wooden plaque arrived by courier, engraved with gold foil lettering on smooth oak, the beginning room est. This year, with love. For Soren and Leora. He hadn't ordered it. She had. He hung it above the door before sunrise, the house still dark and quiet. And for the first time since the twins were born, he stood in the hallway, looked at the nursery from outside, and smiled, not at what it held, but at what it promised. Inside that room wasn't just warmth. It was the start of a life worth staying awake for. The first photograph wasn't planned. It wasn't filtered or staged, didn't feature wardrobe stylists or branded strollers. It was snapped quietly by an elderly woman walking her dog outside a community clinic. Caius Navarro was holding the door open with one hand, Leora tucked gently in the crook of his other arm. Isolde followed behind, balancing a diaper bag over one shoulder. Soren's tiny knit cap peeking out from the blanket sling strapped across her chest. No assistants, no entourage, just two new parents adjusting a car seat on the sidewalk. By the time the image reached social media, it had already gone viral. From boardroom to bottles, billionaire dad seen holding his daughter in public tech tycoon carries his baby, and diaper. Bag Isolde Marin steps into motherhood with grace and quiet power, but this time, the headlines weren't mocking. They were stunned, curious, even admiring. Caius's PR team, predictably, reached out in a panic. We can still control the narrative, his lead publicist said, pacing in front of his office. A formal statement, a press release, a photo op with the twins. No, Caius interrupted, his tone final. But we don't need a brand story. We just need truth. The publicist looked uncertain. So, nothing? He thought about it for a moment, then said, one post, her words, not mine. That evening, Isolde sat on the nursery floor, laptop balanced on a pillow, both babies sleeping soundly in their cribs. Are you sure? She asked, looking over her shoulder. Caius sat nearby, bottle warming instructions in hand. If you want to. If not, we stay silent. She nodded slowly, then typed, we didn't plan to share this. But the world peeked in. So here's our truth. We're learning, stumbling, laughing, surviving, becoming. Two little humans entered our lives and rearranged every corner of it. They don't care about boardrooms or gossip columns. They care about warmth, food, eye contact, and we care about them. We are not perfect, but we are present. Welcome, Soren and Leora. Love, two very tired, very grateful first-time parents. And a beginning room and family by choice. She hit post, then closed the laptop and leaned back against his chest. The response was immediate. Tens of thousands of comments flooded in, not from investors or influencers, but from parents, nurses, single mothers, young couples. This made me cry. Thank you for showing that real doesn't have to be polished. More of this kind of love, please. The next day, Isolde received a message from her old professor in Malta. I saw the photo. I read your words. You have become the kind of mother every nurse dreams of being. Gentle, strong, unseen but essential. I'm proud of you. She closed her eyes and breathed. Maybe this was enough. Maybe it had always been. At the estate, the staff quietly adjusted. Cribs were cleaned twice daily. Kitchen routines shifted to accommodate midnight tea, lactation snacks, and stroller access near the service entrance. Caius held early meetings in the sunroom now, Leora sometimes asleep in a carrier against his chest. He muted all notifications during feedings. No more red carpets, no press junkets, no charity gala speeches, just warmth and time. One evening, they sat on the patio, twilight melting across the hills. Soren snored softly on Isolde's chest. Leora dozed in a nearby bassinet. Caius sipped ginger tea, his sleeves rolled, his expression unreadable. "What are you thinking?" she asked. He looked at her. At some point in my life, I believed success meant solitude, being untouchable. And now? He glanced at the twins. Now I think the real empire is what we build when no one's watching. She smiled. Then I guess we're monarchs of spit-up and sleepless nights. Long may we reign. They toasted quietly, ceramic mugs clinking under the stars. And in that moment, without needing to say it, they both understood. Something sacred. Love doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it just settles in. Familiar, peaceful, permanent. It began with a whisper. A seemingly harmless email forwarded between two executives. Then a private dinner, a handshake, a discreet nod at the end of a quarterly call. Caius had built his tech empire with precision. But somewhere in the shadows of his temporary absence, while he'd been learning to hold a bottle instead of a stylus, ambitions had awakened, and they smelled blood. He walked into the boardroom like he always did, on time, unreadable, and alone. Except this time, he wasn't unaware. "Let's begin," he said flatly, as the board members straightened in their seats. 12 screens lit up on the wall. Stock trends, investor sentiment, product performance. Most looked normal. One didn't. A red slide. Motion of leadership vote. He turned his head slowly. Who added this to the agenda? Silence. Then Lucien Rowe, the CFO, cleared his throat. "We assumed, given recent events, your focus has shifted to personal matters. Perhaps a temporary transition in leadership would..." Caius raised a brow. A transition? To whom? Lucien gave a thin smile. "I've been preparing to step in, to maintain stability." "No doubt," Caius said, voice ice. Another board member, Diane from legal, spoke up. "Caius, this isn't a criticism, it's structure. The company needs clear stewardship, especially with the upcoming AI rollout." He leaned back in his chair. "And I assume you already voted?" Lucien nodded. "Pending your approval." Caius let the room sit in heavy silence, then said, "Project Swan, the empathy-based algorithm we've been developing for 2 years. What's the latest security patch version?" Lucien blinked. "Excuse me?" "Patch number. Version log. Go on." I'd have to check." Caius turned to Diane. "What's the current latency lag on our predictive emotion model across low-bandwidth markets?" She hesitated. "It's something we're optimizing." He looked around the room. "You want my chair, but none of you can carry what I built." He stood slowly, walked to the head of the table. "My time with my children didn't weaken me. It sharpened me. It reminded me why I started this company in the first place, to understand human emotion better than machines. But that begins with leading like a human, not a vulture." Lucien stiffened. "We were just thinking of the company's future." "I am the company's future." He pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. "And that," he added, "is my motion, to remove you from the board. Effective immediately." Gasps. Murmurs. A legal advisor from compliance stood to object. But Caius had already secured the necessary signatures from 4 silent allies, members who had once questioned him, but now respected what fatherhood had taught him about vulnerability and resilience. Lucien's face drained of color. Security escorted him out. Diane followed, quietly resigning without a word. Caius sat back down. The boardroom remained still. "Meeting adjourned," he said. Back at the estate, Isolde was bouncing Soren on her hip when she heard the garage door open. He walked in without his jacket, looking exhausted. She moved toward him. That bad? He leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers. No, he whispered. That necessary. She smiled gently. Come upstairs. They both giggled today, at the same time. Now that, he said, smiling faintly, is the best boardroom victory I've ever had. That night, with both babies asleep and the monitor casting a soft glow, they lay side by side in bed, quiet, present, full. You could have stayed quiet, she murmured, taken their deal, focused on us. He turned his head to her. I am focused on us, but I won't let anyone rewrite what I built, especially not for reasons that have nothing to do with competence. You fought for your empire. I fought for our future. She rested her head on his chest, heart sinking with his, and for the first time in weeks, he slept without interruption. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Wrapped in simple brown parchment and stamped with Maltese postmarks, the envelope was worn at the corners, as though it had traveled a long way not just across the ocean, but through years of silence. Isolde found it tucked between a parenting magazine and a box of infant vitamins on the kitchen counter. The handwriting on the front made her pause. Her knees nearly gave out. She ran her fingers over the inked lines again, just once. Then slowly she peeled the envelope open. Caius was upstairs in the nursery with Leora, humming a made-up melody, when he heard her voice. Caius? He turned. She stood in the doorway, eyes glistening, a folded letter in her hand. You okay? He asked. She nodded faintly. I got a letter. From my mother. His expression softened. He had heard stories of her mother's pride, her disapproval, the endless silence after. Isolde had chosen to work as a housekeeper instead of marrying the pharmacist back home. He set Leora gently into her crib and crossed the room. She wrote back. He asked quietly. She forgave me. They sat on the nursery floor, the monitor casting a soft pulse of blue against the crib bars. Isolde unfolded the letter, her fingers trembling slightly. Can I read it to you? She asked. Caius nodded and pulled her gently into his arms. She began. My dearest daughter, it took me too long to write this, and for that, I am sorry. I was so afraid of the world taking you that I forgot you were always meant to belong to it. When you left for America, I thought I had lost you, not just to a country, but to choices I didn't understand. But you didn't abandon us. You saved us. Your sister told me about your work, how you sent money even when you had so little. And then she told me you were expecting twins. I wept, not in shame, but in awe. A daughter of mine, on foreign soil, raising two souls with nothing but courage in her bones. I am proud of you, Isolde. I am proud of the woman, the mother, the lioness you've become. If I never get to hold your children, kiss their cheeks, or stroke their hair, please know my love still finds them. I pray every night for your strength, for their protection, and for the man you have chosen to stand beside. I was wrong to judge, and I am sorry for the time I wasted. You did not disgrace me, Isolde. You healed me. With all the love I failed to say before, your mother. By the time she finished, Isolde's voice was thick, but steady. A tear slid down her cheek, and she didn't wipe it away. Caius held her tighter. She called you a lioness, he whispered. She's right. Isolde gave a watery laugh. She called you the man I chose to stand beside. He brushed his lips against her temple. Then I'll keep earning it. The twins began to stir in their cribs, and Isolde rose slowly, walking over to them. She looked down at Soren's tiny curled fingers, then to Leora's slow blinking gaze. And then, almost without thinking, she whispered something her mother used to murmur when she was sick as a child. A prayer. May your hearts never learn fear. May your breath always come easy. May your dreams be tall and kind. And may love never forget your name. Behind her, Caius stood at the doorway, listening. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just let her words fill the room like a blessing stitched into the walls. A legacy passed down. A silence finally healed. The kind of quiet that only happened when both twins had finally gone down without a fight. Soren had curled up beside his stuffed giraffe. Leora had fallen asleep clutching the hem of her mother's old t-shirt. And downstairs, in the soft golden spill of the bedroom lamp, Caius stood barefoot at the window, sleeves rolled to his elbows, watching the moonlight skim the surface of the pool. Isolde entered without a sound. He turned at the rustle of her robe. She wore one of his oversized shirts, sleeves grazing her wrists. No makeup, no performance, just her, raw and restful. He smiled. "Are they asleep?" he asked. She nodded and crossed to him. Finally, they stood there for a beat, just breathing in the stillness they rarely got to enjoy anymore. Her fingers brushed his. He didn't move to take her, didn't push. He waited. She looked up at him. "You've been patient with me." He tilted his head slightly, his voice a murmur. "You've just brought life into this world. You don't owe me anything." Her eyes shimmered. "I want to," she whispered, "but not like that night." He stiffened, not from rejection, but from attention. "I want—" Slower, she continued. "Not rushed, not wild, just real. I want to feel it." He nodded, then took her hand and led her back to the bed. He kissed her forehead first, then her cheeks, then her shoulders, where tension still lived from long nights feeding and rocking and walking. Her fingers slid into his hair, drawing him closer. There was no heat and urgency, no fever in their touch, only a quiet reverence, a gentle reunion. His shirt slipped off her shoulders. Her robe melted down his arms. They moved as if learning each other all over again. He traced the faint silver lines on her lower belly, marks she once feared he wouldn't see as beautiful, but he did. He kissed each one like a vow. She pulled him down, cradling his face. "I used to think love was fire," she murmured. "Explosive, dangerous, short-lived." He ran a thumb across her lips. "And now?" he asked softly. "Now," she said, pressing her mouth to his chest. "I know what love feels like." He whispered her name like a sacred thing. Isolde. The lovemaking was tender, unhurried. His hands memorized the curve of her body again, not for pleasure alone, but as worship. Her breath caught in rhythm with his. Every sigh, every gaze, every movement, they wrote a new language between them. A declaration, a promise, that even after chaos, there could still be calm, that even after storms, love could choose to stay. They stayed in bed long after, limbs tangled, skin warm with trust. Caius brushed her hair back and kissed her temple. "You're different," he whispered. "I feel different," she replied, tracing circles on his chest. "But in the best way." He nodded. "So do I." The garden behind the Navarro estate had never looked more alive. Balloons in soft hues danced on the breeze, tied delicately to white lattice arches. Long tables draped in cream linens were topped with pastel cakes, finger foods, and vintage china. Glass pitchers overflowed with lavender lemonade and iced mango tea. Isolde stood by the stroller, adjusting the bow on Leora's headband, while Soren squealed from his father's arms. The twins had turned one, and in that sun-drenched afternoon, surrounded by laughter and low jazz playing through hidden speakers, the family Caius once thought he'd never have, finally bloomed. Children toddled across the lawn, chasing soap bubbles that sparkled in the light. A photographer clicked away quietly, capturing moments without intruding. Soren clapped along to the birthday song, smashing cake between his tiny fingers. Leora blinked solemnly at the candle before Caius gently helped her blow it out. Isolde laughed from across the table. Her hair was twisted into a loose braid, a soft peach dress hugging her waist. She looked radiant, not from makeup or styling, but from something deeper, from joy earned, from peace protected. Later in the afternoon, guests gathered near the fountain. Caius held a champagne flute, its golden contents barely touched. He glanced at the sky, the light fading to a golden blush, then to Isolde, who stood by the twins, whispering to Leora with a kiss on her cheek. He turned to the crowd and raised his glass. "I've spoken at shareholder summits, product launches, board takeovers," he began. "I've built systems that predict emotion before people speak it. I've created things that change the world." He looked toward his family again, but none of it compares to this. Eyes turned. He walked slowly toward Isolde, stopping just a few feet from her. She never asked for this, never demanded recognition, but without her none of this would have meant anything. The guests grew quiet. Even the wind stilled. "She didn't just give me children, she gave me a future, one worth coming home to, one worth building." He lifted his glass higher, voice thick but steady. "To Isolde Marin," he said, "the best empire I ever built." She swallowed back tears. A hush fell and then applause. Someone whistled. Another shouted, "To Isolde." Caius set down his glass and moved to her. He kissed her forehead, then knelt beside the twins, wrapping them both into his arms. A photographer captured it in a single frame, Isolde's hand on Caius' shoulder, Soren giggling, Leora reaching for her father's chin. A family, not just made, but chosen. That night, after guests had gone and confetti had been swept away, Isolde stepped out to the garden once more. The string lights still glowed above. The scent of roses lingered in the air. She watched Caius rock Soren to sleep through the window, then leaned against the wooden archway and whispered aloud to the sky, "We made it!" And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. The Navarro estate had quieted. The last staff member had left. The twins were asleep, their soft breathing the only sound behind the nursery door. Outside, the garden still glowed under fairy lights, soft orbs suspended like stars from the trees, swaying gently in the breeze. Caius stepped onto the patio, loosening his tie and sipping from a glass of water. He didn't expect anyone to be out there, but then he saw her. Isolde stood barefoot on the stone path, facing the rose wall. She turned slowly, a faint smile playing on her lips. She wore a white satin slip dress that shimmered under the lights, her braid untied, her bare shoulders catching the silver of the moonlight. "You're not tired?" he asked gently. "Not yet," she whispered. "I have one last gift." She walked toward him with slow, deliberate steps, stopping only when they stood chest to chest. Her fingers traced the front of his shirt. "I spent so long wondering if I was just a moment to you," she said. "But this year, you've given me 1,000 reasons to believe in forever." Caius's hand found her waist. "You are not a moment, Isolde. You're every breath I didn't know I was holding." She looked up at him, and then slowly, deliberately stepped back, and dropped to one knee. Caius blinked. Isolde's eyes glistened. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a slender silver ring. Not expensive, not flashy, simple and deliberate, just like her. "Let me marry you again," she said softly. "Not for paperwork, not because of the twins, not because we were already bound by vows whispered between IV beeps and hospital monitors." She took his hand. "Let me marry you, my way." The lights above them hummed. The garden seemed to hold its breath. "I want to promise you things that matter," she said, "like showing up when it's hard, forgiving without keeping score, and making sure our children grow up seeing their parents not just in love, but in respect." She pressed the ring into his palm. "You once knelt for me in a hospital gown. You didn't need grand gestures to be brave. Now let me be the one who chooses us." Out loud, with both knees steady and heart wide open, Caius didn't speak. He dropped to his knees in front of her, cradled her face, kissed her like she was the only breath left in the world. "I do," he said into her mouth. She smiled through tears. "You already did." He slipped the ring on his finger. No audience, no cameras, just truth beneath fairy lights. They stayed there on their knees, forehead to forehead, wrapped in silence and promise. Later, they lay together on the velvet chaise where everything had once begun. Her head rested on his chest. His hand grazed her thigh in soft circles. Isolde tilted her head to him. "Still don't sleep." He smiled, brushing her cheek with the back of his knuckles. "Not when you're beside me." She sighed. "Then we'll stay awake together. For the rest of our days." The night settled like a hush across Beverly Hills. Inside the Navarro estate, everything was still. The garden party had long ended. Fairy lights dimmed to a soft glow. Dishes were done. Wrapping paper tucked away. The echoes of laughter now rested inside the walls like blessings. Upstairs, the nursery was dark, except for a nightlight shaped like a cloud. 2 cribs stood side by side, and within them, Soren and Leora slept peacefully, their little bellies rising and falling in rhythm. Leora had her thumb in her mouth. Soren clutched a small stuffed lion. Downstairs, in front of the marble fireplace, Caius and Isolde curled, together on the velvet chaise, the very one where it all began. The flames danced quietly, casting a soft orange glow across the floor. No television, no distractions, just the sound of burning wood and shared breath. Isolde rested her head on his bare chest, her hand draped across his heart. Caius stroked her arm absently. They didn't cry once tonight. They were too full on cake and attention, she murmured with a lazy smile. He chuckled. "You think they'll remember any of it?" "No, But we will. A pause. The kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. Caius pressed his lips to her temple. Do you ever think, he whispered, about how different life could have been if I hadn't walked into that wine gallery that night? She looked up at him, her gaze soft and knowing. No, she said, because I don't believe in accidents anymore. I believe in second chances dressed up as detours. I believe in grace that waits even when we don't deserve it. She tucked herself closer into his arms. I believe in you. They sat like that for what felt like hours, watching the fire, breathing, in rhythm, listening to the clock tick softly in the hallway. It wasn't grand, it wasn't loud, but it was enough. Caius tilted his head slightly, looking down at her. You okay? She nodded. This is the kind of silence I prayed for. Thank you for spending this moment with CedarLight Love Stories, where every tale reminds us that love is timeless and powerful. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments what part spoke to you most. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another heartfelt story. Share this with someone who believes in love's light, and let's grow together in love.